Hello everyone. Our video today is much older than the usual material I cover, as it's just over a year old now. However, given what we saw in the previous videos in this series, you would be hard-pressed to tell that the sentiments here come from a different discussion. As in previous episodes, the audio quality of these recordings can be spotty at best. Most speakers can be heard relatively clearly. For those that are less so, I have attempted to tweak the audio a bit to help, and when it's particularly bad, I will do my best to restate a speaker's words for clarity. All that being said, let us begin.
You know, I think when we first talked about having a conversation here about issues of racial, social justice, we were thinking about the voices that never seem to be heard. Some of us I scream and shout and kick the table all day long, and it feels like many of us aren't heard for a variety of reasons, structural reasons, cultural reasons.
Kicking and screaming are the elements of throwing a tantrum. If that's your strategy towards making changes, is it any wonder that you feel like you're treading water?
You know, the narratives that we hear the narratives that we tell about education are, I think, really fundamental to what we think the future looks like, what we think community looks like, space, change. But I think that many of us find our voice, it feels hard and frustrating that our voices aren't the ones that are privileged.
But you're white. You already have privilege. Oh, but wait, that's right. You're white. You can't see your privilege. So you think you don't have any, when obviously you do. It's weird then that no one is listening to you.
And so how do we, as a group, how do we as a community amplify voices instead of just amplifying sort of pre-existing powerful narratives? How do we change the narratives? How do we make sure that other folks, particularly in ed tech, other folks are heard? So this was to frame that as a question.
Yeah. So the question is, who gets heard?
Yeah. Who gets heard?
Who gets heard? Who do y'all think gets heard?
Who do I think gets heard? Well, I would hope it's those people who have reasoned arguments with facts on their side. But then again, Western society has a tendency to attribute credibility to unqualified celebrities, politicians, and anyone who can attain any version of the title doctor. So, yeah, I guess it depends on your status and the size of your platform. Sad, but true.
And what are they saying?
And what are they saying? What are they saying to you?
What do you mean?
I guess I mean when we talk about education, period, right? Whether it be education form, activism, edtech, whatever your hub is, whatever your space is, who gets heard and why? That is the challenge I often put out to y'all. Yes, Peter.
Lately, I've been really concerned about the corporate appropriation of education. I see it more in the States than I do in Canada. I worry still about it in Canada, so it's a global issue. They're running education conferences as if it's educators. They're seducing teachers into becoming, I don't want to name any particular company at this point. I know Audrey probably will at some point. But you know, you become a certified educator for this company and you get, you feel good, it makes you feel good. So you go out, and you're a
Brand.
I'll watch my language. Now you're
sorry, safe space. You gotta say what you gotta say.
Oh, we're in a safe space where you gotta say what you're going to say. Well, is it also safe to choose my words carefully? Or am I not allowed a filter in this safe space? Anyway, the concern over the corporatization of education is a fair point. For-profit education, at least to me, holds with it similar dangers as does for-profit prisons. As a related aside, if you have a chance, I highly recommend the PBS Frontline documentary called College Inc. It's a few years old now, but it does a great job outlining the pitfalls of education as a business. I've put a link in the description where you can watch the entire documentary.
Go on.
Well, now you feel like a prostitute for that company. I mean, basically, you're out there, yakking for the company. Even though the company, you as a teacher have the best intentions for the use of that tool, there's stuff going on in the background where they want customers for life.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Okay. Still thinking, still mulling. Okay.
Given their introductory rhetoric, I get the feeling that corporate influence wasn't the kind of answer our presenters were hoping to hear in regards to who gets heard.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just really a charity versus justice model. I think that especially the privatization of education and charter movement, which in its inception was meant to be serving as a lab for school districts to come up with, creative practices, and now it's used as a solve or a solution for what we dub the achievement gap, which is really just historical underserving. And so I feel like I see it as kind of gross, this gross misnomer of charity, and we're going to solve this issue.
Privatization, charter schools, all reasonable concerns, I guess. But see, you're not talking about who gets heard over others in education. You really need to get more specific so we can identify and root out the real problem.
Yeah, I think one of the voices that I hear becoming more and more prevalent is just the idea of this revisionist history in education. That, just like you hear Trump saying, the old America, I'm hearing more and more educators talking about, our old schools. And since when was that helpful for Black and brown and poor youth? When we talk about, yesteryear. And so this revisionist history that's being painted in education circles is really alarming to me. Just when you study the history of the experience of kids who look like me in these same schools that we now celebrate as, they had the answer. That concerns me.
So people promoting revisionist history, which ignores people that look like you, Black and brown students. Now we're getting somewhere.
Well, speaking to that, I think we think of this charter movement as this brand new concept, but it's just part of a deeper story. So historically, lots of wealthy white money from the North went to the South to create schools for Black children post-Reconstruction that looked a certain way, that only focused on vocational ed, despite the fact that teachers had been having classes about empowerment. And we all know the research that kids of color who receive classes, information, books that empower will do better academically also. But Carnegie, Rockefeller, all these institutions have been doing this since the 1800s, have been feeding money. It's the charter movement of like, we're going to tell you how to have your schools. We're going to send white teachers that don't look like the kids to man these schools, to oversee this. And this is, a constant big debate. So I think it's important to look at it historically as this isn't a new concept. This is built into the structure and the fabric of our country. And that's why I think it's much harder than one of these fixes. And how do we bear witness to the experiences of different, of teachers, of students, and not consume them? Because I do think that's a danger with how easy it is to sit. We focus so much on voice that we don't focus on listening, like the other side of that, and we end up just consuming people's experiences. We don't just witness and allow ourselves to experience them. We just, I don't know, that's a struggle.
Yes, the charter school program is just the modern incarnation of the deeper historical and structural system of white money being used to create schools whose teachers don't look like the students they're teaching. Because, after all, only like should educate like. White teachers should stick to teaching white students, and Black teachers should only teach Black students.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
How progressive.
I just wanted to share in relationship to something that you said. And what I thought of was to remember the invisible voice. I think that a lot of corporate organizations or companies that are associated or connected in some way to schools, it's easy to maybe attach yourself to something that's brand new and developing because you can build it and create it on your own. But it's another thing to maybe latch one to a school that is quote unquote failing, a school that is struggling, those children that have consistently been seen as invisible, and like their problems are not the problems of the city, of the county, of the, that we all share. And so in this conversation of privilege and what is white privilege and what does that mean?
The invisible voices. Well, unless you go to some very extreme lengths, all voices are invisible, because sound is invisible. Okay, I'm being a smartass. But I agree. Forcing people to step back, sit down, and hush up just because you don't like what they have to say is completely wrong. You shouldn't do that, or advocate for that. It's a matter of privilege. White privilege. And now we're going to find out what that means. I can't wait.
We have to, I would just share, you have to remember that invisible voice that is not being shared. So if your voices are being broadcasted everywhere, then maybe it's a responsibility of you now to stop using your own voice, but allow the voices of silent people and those people that are not being tended to and respected and honored as, you're still a human being, your voice needs to be heard. You're still a human being, we need to see you. And a lot of times we don't see them unless we see them on television because there was a riot at that school, or because, that child did something and that child is now being arrested. You know what I mean? So that's the only time those voices get heard.
Those voices at riots or arrested. Huh. Who is she talking about, I wonder? Who is she implying are the invisible voices? Regardless, if you are being heard, if you do have a voice, you have a responsibility to be quiet and let someone else talk. Your voice needs to be invisible because you're benefiting from white privilege. Oh, she's saying non-white people are invisible and have no voices and need white people to be quiet and to give them a platform because they cannot speak without white people letting them. I see how it is. I mean, all those years where Barack Obama was president, he was only able to speak because white people quieted down enough to allow him a platform. No, we're not diminishing his personal accomplishments or agency at all with this line of thinking. Not at all. Got it.
Is when they are screaming to be saved or to be touched or to be looked at and acknowledged as, we're here. And that's what's happening in a lot of our schools where my children are, where I know they are screaming for someone to just see them and see their gift and see their, the God that is in them. And it's too many of us that are constantly putting a blind eye to that stuff.
Screaming for attention. Again, back to the tantrum imagery. I wonder if anyone in the room disagrees with these notions. Do you think they would speak up if they did? I mean, after all, this is a safe space.
I think my question is just what is the message that you guys like? What's the message of silent voices? Because I'm kind of confused.
Isaac, can you repeat that for everybody?
I just wanted to know what is the message of the silent voices that you guys talk about of the students? Because obviously you don't know, and I would like to know.
Okay, the audio is really bad here, and I've done my best to enhance it. But To paraphrase, the speaker asked, "What is the message of the silent voices who are not being heard?" A very, very good question. I mean, here we are in a room full of educators, in a safe space, talking about not being able to amplify the necessary conversations. And so, let's have that conversation, right? It's a very good question. Now, for the sake of fun irony, let's see how prolonged the silence is ahead of getting an answer to that question.
Well, here's my thing. So are you, okay, so you're a student coming into the situation, yes?
Yeah.
How often in your schooling, not just in your current situation, did you feel like your own voice was at least given some credibility when you spoke up? Not just like now, but like throughout your education.
So, answering his question with a question. This is called, well, question dodging, a tactic that is exactly as the name implies. All this does is undercut the substance of the previous speaker's complaint, that some voices are invisible and/or silenced. The questioner would like clarity on what she meant. But instead of giving an answer, we now have the onus put onto the questioner to describe if they've ever felt like they weren't being heard, which has nothing to do with anything. Brilliant. You're certainly providing everyone a valuable education here.
And I want you to be honest. Like, this is your life. Like, we need to hear from you.
You just did. He asked you to explain what message is not being heard, and you dodged the question. So, we actually need to be hearing from you.
Take all the time you need. I gave a lot of wait time. Like, you good.
He needs to take time to answer your question, but you'll give his question no consideration at all. Classy.
I'm not gonna say I never was heard, because I wasn't, especially, I forgot who basically mentioned this. I think it was her. The fact that we are in new school, so it's just like we are with broadcast, so I was able to go to different people and ask for help, or just ask about different things.
And presented EduCon?
Yeah. I don't know. Sorry.
And no, don't be sorry. Like, these are the things that I think a lot of our students also struggle with, right? Like, we say student voice, but it's also the point where, like, they've been castigated from their own voices for the better part of, I would say, 10 years until maybe they get to like a special high school or get to and that's sad, because it seems like high school has a dominant situation when it comes to giving student voice. I do want to turn it to Melinda, though, because I'm talking too much now.
Wow. That was a lot of filler and nonsense. It's really impressive how you silenced that student's voice by giving him the runaround and cornering him into a position where he apologized for asking the question. Good job. A+.
I think that everything that's been said is spot on, particularly like you just said. I think when we talk about privileged voices, it's really about who always gets the megaphone. And I haven't had coffee this morning, so you'll forgive me.
Who always gets the megaphone? Well, tell us. Who does always get the megaphone? It should be patently obvious, right? I mean, I'm dying to know the name of those people who are hogging the spotlight and drowning out any dissenting voices.
This is inspiring, but I hear conversations around issues of ed tech and that type of thing. on a very base level, it's whose voices are heard. Our schools today are 50% or more students of color. And when we look around and we look at who's on school boards and whose voices are really being heard in policies in schools that are majority students of color, it is not majority people of color. And representation matters. And I don't care how many degrees you have and how skilled you are and how well-meaning you are and how caring you are. There is something to be said for having that kind of cultural identity.
So you don't care how qualified someone might be. You don't care how skilled they are. You only care about identity. Racial identity. Got it.
That's not to say that white teachers and white administrators do not care and can't understand and work in these schools. But when a child sees a teacher of color, when a child sees a leader of color, that sends a message that is priceless, and it brings something to the leadership and it brings something to the administration of schools. And when individuals don't feel like they have a voice, as you were saying, you're not seeing their humanity, you're not seeing what can actually happen in those schools and those schools to thrive. And I become increasingly frustrated, all of us do, when we see certain individuals always with the megaphone. And it's okay to take, I don't know if that's an SLA principle or not, but I think somebody said yesterday, know when to step up and when to step back. Some folks need to step back like 20 yards, right? Step back, sit down, hush your mouth, and let some other people step up and have a place.
Oh, exactly. I mean, regardless of how qualified, educated, or skilled you are on any particular subject, if you're speaking too much or too often, you need to step back, sit down, and hush up. You need to give a place to those people who are unable to step up or to speak for themselves. People of color. It's bad when even my own sarcasm makes me ill to say it. Underlining the implicit notion that some people are just inherently weaker or less capable than other people based on their skin color, it just turns my stomach.
I want to jump on because I think what Melinda's saying about who our students see in front of them with any kind of authority, be it as your teacher, as your administrator, as your school board member, as your politician, whoever that may be, it's so critical for our children of color to see people who look like them. I think it is equally or conceivably even more important that our children with privilege see people of color in those positions. As a mother of two white girls, they need to see that.
Again, the important thing here is skin color and keeping up appearances. Making sure people are put into educational positions of authority and influence, first and foremost, because their skin is the correct shade. A room full of educators arguing and nodding their heads at the notion that race should supersede merit. Can they even hear themselves?
So much, it's so important. And our focus so often is on our children of color who need that so much. But we need to ensure that that representation is far wider than that. Let's not limit our expectations.
She said wider, not whiter.
Yeah. It would be bad to imply that representation be based around race. I mean, let's just make that clear. Holy cats. Okay, I think I'm done with this one. I've become mentally and somewhat emotionally drained listening to this. The one ray of hope was that student asking for the speakers to explain themselves. He got entirely shut down, but hopefully that didn't discourage him from continuing to ask those kinds of questions of people who assert themselves to be authority figures. My fingers are crossed. As always, thank you for watching.